So I have another audiobook review today. I just finished The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, and it was read by Neil Gaiman, and it was super fun. I honestly did not actually know what I was getting into when I got into the book, as I was pretty much like, oh, it's a Neil Gaiman one, and I can get the audiobook through the library right now since they do have the electronic audiobooks, and that's like how I'm getting half my books right now. Other than the ones that I already have from the library that I should be finishing, that I'm like, I have no time limit on them because we're all in quarantine, so I have not been doing good reading those. But I have still been going through audiobooks, and this was my most recent one that I finished. It was really fun and really interesting. Especially at the start of it, I didn't know what I was getting into, and I was like, is this just going to be like a contemporary fiction? This prologue's kind of slow and odd, and then it goes back in time to the meat of the story when the main character was like 7 years old, and then there's all these magical happenings and things, and I was like, oh, this is really fun. I really like this. This is a cool book and an interesting concept, and I'm not like an expert on these things, but I think that it was probably in part related to some of like the fairy/fae lore that you get from like the British Isles and all that. And so that was really fun. Elements of it also really reminded me of Diana Wynne-Jones, who is my favorite author, so any book that reminds me of her writing is a pretty good win in my book. But yeah, I had a super lot of fun with it. It was a very unique concept. It was super fun that Neil Gaiman himself was reading it. Like, the audiobook started up, and I hadn't even noticed that on it, but he started talking, and I was like, oh, I wonder who this is, because it does, like, the book introduction with the title, and then it's, like, read by Neil Gaiman. Or I think he said myself, Neil Gaiman. Anyways, whatever. The point being, I was very excited about it. I was like, oh, I don't rarely ever get to have the author themselves read their audiobook to me. This is super fun. And I really enjoyed it. I just keep saying that. But yeah, the characters were really interesting. I really liked the cat that the main character meets and befriends. Super cute. I'm super in a cat mood right now because having been stuck so much at home for quarantine, I've been spending a lot of time with my cats, and my cat Binks is black and white, and the one in the book was black and white, so I was kind of just picturing Binks the whole time. It was super fun. I really loved it. Yeah, and the magic went places that I wasn't expecting it to go. There were some interesting moments early on. I guess minor spoiler, but it is fairly early on. The main character meets this girl, Letty, and they go to this pond that she calls her ocean, and they go sort of to a magical world through that. I'm not entirely clear what like transporty type stuff happened through the water, but they went to like this magical-ish place that had like orangey sky and stuff, and the main character ends up getting hurt. He does something to his foot, and then it's like an entire chapter devoted to this. He's at home, and he's got like this, he calls it a hole in his foot. That's where the pain in his foot when he got hurt out there came from, and he figures out that there's like this worm thing in his foot, and so he digs the worm out of his foot, and that was really kind of disgusting and very descriptive, and the whole time I was just like shuddering, like, ew, 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 this is so gross. But yeah, it was like a whole chapter devoted to it, so it was a lot. But it was a fairly short chapter too, but I was just like, oh my gosh, this whole chapter is like this scene of him digging around in his foot trying to pull a worm out, and it's so gross. But it ended up relating to the magic that ends up going on in the story. They get a babysitter person who comes up and shows up after he's done that with the worm, and basically she is the worm, but not the worm. It's not clear like what her true form is supposed to be, but she did go inside him through his foot and used him as like a transport between the magical world and his world, and apparently can like morph shapes and stuff, and that's how she was like a human and being their babysitter and being really creepy to him and making him real uncomfortable, and just like how the story evolves and develops and what they end up having to do to get rid of her, and then the consequences of getting rid of her. It was great. It was cool. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and I had a lot of fun. And I think this is technically only like the second book of Neil Gaiman's that I've finished, because I've also read Neverwhere by him, maybe one or two others. I've tried a couple others too, and some of them I haven't gotten into. Some of them I'm considering getting into, for example, Stardust, because I really love the movie Stardust, but at the same time I love the movie so much that I don't want to know how the book is different. So I don't know if I'll get into that one, but it does make me want to read more Neil Gaiman. If nothing else, I will probably go back to Neverwhere, because that one was like an adult Alice in Wonderland type story, and Alice in Wonderland is one of my favorite stories too. But anyways, I'm just babbling at this point. But if you haven't read this and are looking for a fun, younger adult kind of, maybe even middle grade fantasy type story, this was a really good one, and I really enjoyed it. It had some very unexpected elements to it, and yeah, I really enjoyed the experience of listening to this book. It was super fun that it was read by Neil Gaiman, so if you can find the audiobook and you like authors reading their own books, it's a great choice for that too. But I think that's probably all I've got on it for now, so that I don't just keep babbling about Neil Gaiman books and wanting to read other ones and whatnot. So yeah, let me know if you happen to have read it below and what your thoughts are if you have read it, because again, it was super fun, and I'd never heard of it, and I haven't really heard people talk about it, so I don't know how popular it is, but I'd love to hear other people's thoughts and opinions on it too. But that's all I've got to say for now, so this is the Umlaut Harper signing out.